TQX. Welcome to Outdoor Wonder.
Hey, this is Jake Taylor, your host of the world's first interview Hikecast. We dive deep as interesting people take me on their favorite hikes. So if you're ready for something a little different, throw this on, get outside, and come take a hike with us. Today we're going for a hike with Darren Virassammy. Darren is the founder and COO of 34 Strong, a top-shelf leadership consulting firm. We met as first-year MBAs, and he's always been one of the most positive and thoughtful people I know. Please enjoy this hike with Darren Virassammy. But first, please save a spot on your shelf for my first book coming out later this year. It's called The Rebel Allocator, and it's a fictional coming-of-age story about a young man who learns about business and life from an unlikely teacher. Imagine Thorndike's The Outsiders meets The Karate Kid. You're probably saying to yourself, fiction? Really, Jake? My goal was to give you everything you'd learn from a good nonfiction book, but wrap it in an entertaining story. Look for it to come out later this year. And now, without further delay, let's get outside. I was thinking the other day, we've known each other now for how long?
06, man.
12 years?
12 years. Yep.
That's crazy.
It is crazy, man.
So I was thinking about the story of, you know, when you were working for a construction company, basically.
Yeah.
And you were building out like Sephora's and other properties that were pretty fancy. Like,
yeah,
it wasn't
Bear
like
Essentials, Neiman Marcus, Gucci, all those high-end retail. Like at Neiman, we did a lot of the high-end retailers that I'm too stupid to be able to even pronounce properly, but we were doing a lot of those ones. But yeah, go on.
So that's what you were working on, and then I know there was a dramatic event that for you really changed the path, you know, when you were driving one day.
Yeah. So with the driving, that was really interesting. That was the first sign. Yeah, it's crazy. You kind of forget about these things, right? Because that's not the one that I typically think about. But what it was, man, was my Kira was a week old. So, you know, she's my firstborn child is a week old, and it's my first week back at work, and I'm driving. I'm on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, you know, narrow 2-lane bridge. It's 6:30 in the morning. My tire blows out on my truck. I swerve across the highway right in front of a big rig, you know, into the shoulder, and, you know, dance with destiny and survive, man.
So it's feels like a near-death experience.
It was
About as close as you want to get to one.
About as close as you want to get to one. As fearful as it was, interestingly enough, I can take my headspace back there. It was a moment of fear, but also a moment of gratitude. And as I reflected as that day went on, I vividly remember it. It just reminded you, hey, this can all be over in a blink. And I think it got me started thinking of, like, what are the things that really matter? Now, keep in mind, you know, my daughter's a week old. I'm a little sleep deprived. As you know, when I was working in the construction land, it was a 2-hour commute to leave from Sacramento area to get down to San Francisco. And why the heck I was doing that was a little crazy. But, you know, Jake, sometimes you can't always, as Steve Jobs said, you can't always connect the dots going forward, but you can going back. That whole experience working there, it was a great gift, man. I learned it set me up for understanding the need for the work that I currently do. My grandmother was incredibly sick during that time, and she passed away about a month before Kira was born. So it was June of 2012 she passed away. My daughter was born July of 2012. And because I was in the Bay Area multiple times every week, I never ever look back and say, gosh, I should have gotten down and visited my grandma more. Every single week, no matter what I had going, I was going to see her at least once that week. She was immobile, she couldn't speak, any of that, but she knew I was there, and knew when family came and visited, and I was able to visit her right up until her last day. So I'm super thankful for that experience. You know, it helped me to just get through that patch of being able to see her and gave me a reason to be down in the Bay Area. And
So what do you think what was the priority shift that happened at that point that kind of changed you in a lot of ways? Like, I feel like before that, I don't want to say that it was like a fear-based mentality, but you had a kind of a corporate-ish gig going.
Yeah.
I mean, you were in line to become, a pretty high up guy at this company.
Yeah.
That was doing a pretty good business.
Yeah.
And then you decide to go out on your own, which with a young kid and, a young family would always feel scary. What happened in that moment that changed your perspective or changed your priorities that made you take that kind of leap?
That moment, Jake, planted the seed of awareness of how precious life is, not only my own, my daughter's, and my family. That moment led to a moment 4 months later when in December of 2012, I'm sitting on a lanai overlooking the Pacific Ocean on the big island of Hawaii. And Kira, my daughter, ends up laughing out loud for the first time in my lap. When I put those two moments together, the moment of like, wow, the truck swerved in front of this big rig, and her laughing out loud, they kind of pulled in completely different directions, but they were both necessary. When she laughed out loud, it made me realize she has all kinds of potential that she's still gonna step into. She laughed out loud. She's gonna walk, she's gonna talk, she's gonna go to kindergarten. Who knows what she's gonna do? And I reflected back to that moment when my vehicle swerved in front of a truck, realizing how precious life was. And then I had to ask myself, what happened to your potential, dude? You're still alive?
Yeah.
You're still alive. Just because your daughter's gonna do all these things doesn't mean that you are just done here. And I realized I was excited to see her potential grow. I was helping students that I was teaching at the time get into theirs,
Right.
but I had given up on mine. I had settled into a gig that paid the bills, was helping me, pay off business school. That's where we met,
Yeah.
12 years ago. And as I was growing through the company, that's all we did was just focus on getting rid of any student loan debt from that. But that was coming. And I think by that point we were pretty far along the pathway of getting rid of a lot of that stuff. And it became as our good friend Scott Dinsmore used to say, instead of asking how can you afford to do something, the combination of those moments forced me to ask the question, how can you afford not to do something? How can you afford not to step into your own potential, to become your greatest self,
Yeah,
and step into those things, man. But it was a culmination of those two for very, very different reasons. But the laugh triggered the memory of that. And I was like, why has this happened 4 months apart? And one was riddled with life and one was riddled with the complete opposite end, but causing you to reflect at the exact same point deep in your soul.
So it's like you couldn't hide from that kind of
Nah,
moment
man.
in life.
You can't hide from that. And keep in mind, it was in December, right before Christmas. And yeah, man, and the day after Christmas, actually, that very year, I went in and I handed in 2 options to the construction company that I was at. It was either a resignation letter or it was I'll stay on and help train up my replacement and help consult, with you, but transition out. But it was kind of like, from their perspective, it was fielder's choice. I'm either in or out, and I took on more classes teaching and had no idea what the heck I was gonna do, man. Had no idea what I was gonna do, but we stepped into figuring out that I gotta try and connect some of these dots, because the dots were starting to appear. That was the start of realizing there's a lot of other dots that are out there, but you've been blind to them because you've just been so singularly focused and getting a paycheck, really highly disengaged in your work. And within 2 months of that, that's when I met my business partner, 34 Strong.
Do you think that, so now, you're working, you started this company called 34 Strong, which is about creating work environments where people are engaged and they're working from their strengths.
Yeah.
And as you said, a a destination workplace, which I love. I think that's such an interesting idea. But what do you think? Do you think that your active kind of disengagement and seeing the cultural problems that you saw at your previous employer pushed you towards wanting to solve that for other places?
You know, it did, because interestingly enough, while I was there, I was disengaged, but I always say this, I had the gift, and I truly mean that, I had the gift of working in a place where I got disengaged and I saw a whole bunch of team members get disengaged, and there being some interesting cronyism within the senior leadership ranks that were playing out. So that was a gift, because I did get to see that, and I also had the gift of working within organizations where I was highly engaged, where I was part of just incredibly dynamic teams where we trusted leadership, your team trusted each other, you could have open dialogue. And interestingly enough, much like those two moments I earlier described, I had the privilege of, I was working not only at the construction company, but I was also working at a college, just teaching part-time. I had always said I wanted to give back and help educate others if I got my education far enough to do that. And that environment was highly engaged. So I knew at the same time, being highly disengaged in one role, I saw high levels of engagement on the complete opposite side, and I was living in that at the same time.
That's an interesting observation. Maybe I've never thought about it before, and it could be just because I recently read the Leonardo da Vinci biography that came out by Isaacson, and I have a little bit more of an appreciation for art now that I probably was lacking before, being uncultured like I am, and so there's almost like a study of contrasts that are happening. Like you almost can't see the real world unless you have the life and death, the dysfunction and the engagement.
Oh yeah.
Like you almost need extremes in your life to see the bookends of where the reality is.
You know,
otherwise it's just all a little like gray. It's just gray and you don't see.
I couldn't agree with that more. And I don't think, much like your Leonardo da Vinci story there, that it's opened your perspective. I don't think at the time I fully understood that. You know, you didn't realize that's what was going on. One of my really, really closest trusted friends and advisors is a guy named Jake Taylor. He always reminds me about sharpening the saw. And sometimes you don't even realize you're sharpening the saw, you know, and it's just happening, and you don't even realize that. So that's the beauty of what was taking place in those periods. That period of time though, Jake, when I've pressed rewind and looked back, it's helped me in growing my life. I have hanging above my desk at home, live the life you've imagined. And the only way to do that is create it one day at a time. Step into the unknowns, step into the discomfort that's going to come, but have faith that those dots are going to emerge by stepping into the fog. And you might not be able to connect them now, but you're sure as hell going to find a way over time. And sometimes there's things that just happen that you got to roll with. But it's set up my mindset to step more into those places and be comfortable looking at those extremes and for them even where they might be. You know, I don't know if that makes sense, but
let's shift gears for a minute. And you know, I've seen you now lots of times involved with music. Come and watch your band, and so I know that you're an incredible bassist. What do you think that does for you in the rest of your life? You know, like having that artistic outlet. Do you think that it? I know that you think that it helps, but like specifically, how do you think that it helps you?
It's such a critical source of creative outlet. It's my grounding, it's my foundation in so many ways. Much like the bass is in music, it's the root. When I find my way back to playing music or making sure I'm really intentional about listening to music, it is a place where I find.
How do you listen to music, by the way? Do you actually like shut everything out and listen? Because I often think now, like we used to, you know, 100 years ago or less maybe, but people would just sit around and listen to a gramophone.
Oh, right.
Or
Yeah.
like the 70s, all the kids are in the basement and they're
Yeah.
listening to a song and they're not doing anything else.
Yeah.
Except maybe like altering their minds chemically. But
Right.
now, music is just sort of this thing that's always in the background.
Yeah.
Like you don't do nothing but listen to a song.
Uh-huh.
But do you actively do that now?
I do a combination of both. So I can listen to it. Sometimes I'll work and put on a good mix of listening. Sometimes I'll be, working out, or I have a heavy bag at home, and sometimes I'll put on some good tunes. I'm listening to that. Sometimes I'm just listening. Sometimes it's a matter of, we have a Friday night dance party at the house with the kids. They love music. We put it on and we listen, we dance, we have fun. Sometimes I'm putting it on in the music room and I'm working on learning the parts of the bass.
Yeah.
I have the ability, that's a great question. I do have the ability when I'm really dug into a song. Sometimes I hear a part and it really stands out. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's an incredible bass line. Or I can listen and I'll be like, oh my gosh, you hear what that hi-hat pattern is, what that drummer's doing. I'll just micro focus on that, but then I'll want to go learn it, whether it's the bass line or a hi-hat pattern or the piano chord changes or whatever. So it's a whole hybrid of that. I just try to make sure that I never stray too far away from giving myself the opportunity to listen, to kind of go into
So aside from just sort of like using different parts of your brain probably and creativity begetting more creativity, what else do you think it does for you in the let's say in the business world?
Oh, it's huge. So, as was mentioned, the work that I do really focuses on your talents, your strengths. How are they aligned? When are they actually calibrated incredibly well? And if there's one place I can constantly look in my life where I can get to a place where my energy feels up and my talents feel incredibly calibrated, it's music. If I'm ever feeling off, out of balance in any sorts, I will go and I will spend time in my music room playing bass, playing piano. There's times, Jake, where I'm preparing for a keynote talk, large talks I've given, different things like that. And one of the things that I make sure that falls into the rhythm the week before is making sure I get some avid time just really digging into that bass, finding the creative places, because at the end of the day, the thinking, the synapses of being present, being in the moment, being able to tap into my jazz chops as like a jazz musician, right? Of like, if you have to improvise and go with the flow, you never know what's going to happen when you're giving a talk, how people are going to respond.
Yeah.
You never know what might happen with technology or different things. But being able to be comfortable with that and being able to step into that and still create good energy is a thing that I find through my bass. So when I find that deeper inspiration from that, it allows my cup to overflow so I can have more to give to others, whether that's to my team at 34 Strong, our clients we serve, whether it's to my family. And it's an incredible bonding experience for me and my kids, particularly my son, my 2.5-year-old. He loves the drums, and every day he comes in and he asks, Daddy, can you play bass? And I'll play drums, and we just do that. And it's super cool. Yeah, I have pads on the drums, but he's actually moving in time, and sometimes he'll start hitting the hi-hat right in time, and that's just so cool to watch. And I don't tell him how to play or how not to play. The way I look at it, one of my favorite bass players is this guy named Victor Wooten, and he talks about music as a language. And if you think about it, from childhood, we don't necessarily force kids on, here's how you say this word. It just evolves. Yeah. They're learning the language the whole time. That's the way I've approached music with him. I've just looked at it like, hey, you know what, man? The language, your voice, whether it's the piano, the drums, the bass, congas, whatever it is, it's there. You learn to speak it, and you'll find your path. And just allow them to have that total creative freedom to just explore.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to just inspire kids, back to your point about Da Vinci, to just find their way into art and those creative outlets. So
yeah, I think one of the things that I've always appreciated about you for 12 years now is that you're one of the most positive people I know. And not in like a Pollyannish way, like things are perfect, but I have to imagine that being married to you is probably pretty rad for Lisa, because I think you seem like a person that wants to lift others up, and more than even focusing on themselves, which is a very admirable trait. But what I want to kind of ask a tougher question about that, which is in fatherhood.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of those same things come into play. Like, and I think a lot of people find that gear to lift their kids up. Like, you'll do more for your kids than you'd ever do for yourself.
Right.
But what do you think is the toughest thing that you've had to deal with fatherhood? I want to hear that from somebody who is, I think, in a very positive place most of the time.
You know, that is a great question. I think the most challenging part of fatherhood is sometimes the kids will get into that spunk of, or that funk of just seeing and feeling like they are just kind of stuck in, they can't do something and they're giving up on something that I'm like, I know you can do this. You freaking did it like yesterday, you're fine. But then it's like the sky is falling, and then it spirals. Sometimes Kirill will fall into that place. I mean, she's 5, she's going on 6. That's gonna happen. You know, and I do try to say, hey, you know what? Fail stands for first attempt in learning. If we make a mistake, like, it's okay. That being said, Jake, it is a struggle sometimes, because they'll get there, they'll park, they'll camp out, and you know, you're going out, you're connecting with other people. That's one thing, but sometimes your kids look at you and they're just like, shut up, Dad, you know, whatever, and you're kind of getting the bird from the kids. And that, I gotta say, that can be exhausting. And if I'm coming off of an exhausting day for whatever reasons, I mean, I'm usually still pretty energized by what I get to do for work and the teams I get to work with. But when you step into that, being able to flip that switch can be challenging, because I've given so much of that to others.
Yeah.
So being able to still make sure that I can dig a little deeper for the kids when they're actually the ones that are really challenging that even more, because they're your kids. So what do you know? You know, I mean, they love you, but at the same time, they're still kind of pushing the envelope on these things. That can be a little challenging, and sometimes I have to get into my own head to make sure I'm doing that. I really feel blessed with Lisa, with the partnership we have. If I'm not in the space where I'm doing that, sometimes she'll be able to grab the reins and help push that. And there's plenty of times where it's the opposite. She's like, I'm spent. I can't. And you're going through this, because once one does it, then the other one kind of spirals into it. You know how it goes. You know. Yeah. So it's just managing through that and trying to keep that headspace of being able to give that side of me to them when the dynamics are just very different when you're a parent, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more in there, but we can talk about that another day.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I've been kind of thinking about lately, and I don't know if it's because my kids are kind of rising in competitiveness in different sports, especially. But one of the things I struggle with a little bit is how hard to push them.
Yeah.
Because I know that at least they've expressed that it's important to them to get better. Yeah. And I know that it takes deliberate practice and being pretty dedicated to get better at something.
And it's going to suck sometimes.
It's going to suck sometimes.
It's going to suck to get better.
For sure. Yeah. So, you know, when I don't want to feel like I'm pushing them to the point where they're not having any fun anymore. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I also don't want to just give them the out that you know, oh, just, you know, show up and have fun. Well, no, you need to practice a little bit if you want to be good at something. Like, that's just the reality of the world. Yeah. So that balance between pushing and then letting them find it on their own, I find to be, I know I have a proclivity towards, I don't want to say micromanaging, but being like, you know, they'll want to go play catch. Yeah. And if they're kind of dicking around a little bit with it and not taking it seriously, I will say, like, you know what, guys, I think you're practicing bad habits right now that are going to show up in the game. Yep. So I think we should just stop, because you're not making progress right now. You're going backwards. Yep. Which all right, well now like maybe I don't want to play catch with you anymore, Dad, because that's not that much fun.
Yeah.
So, and they're 10 and 7. Like they should be kids and have fun. So like this
Totally.
balance of,
Yeah.
I don't know, this kind of like how much structure versus unstructure.
You know, I go through that very, very similar with Kira. You know, both of us. That's one of the fun pieces we get to share just with martial arts. And there's times, you know, she's had a lot with swimming now, and with the land of swimming, she's been kind of in a space where that's been a lot of the afternoon. So karate training, she's only been getting in once a week, but then I'll work on stuff with her at home, you know, and doing different things. Some days, like last night, we did just some basic stuff, and I always tell her, if we just do the basics, work on your forms, it'll take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, just to do the basics, make sure you're not falling off, you know, on your conditioning with that stuff. And same thing, man. And then some days it's like, just wants to totally goof off, and I wrestle with that, but there's the want to continue moving her forward, just to make sure, but also having the fun. And I don't know if there's an easy answer to where you draw the line, you know, because you do want to make it fun, but you also want them to commit, you know, to like doing these things. You're good at it, you like it.
Well, I want them to have
work.
the habit that if you say something is important to you, here's what's required to get better at it. Yeah, like it's going to take some deep work to be better. So I want that work ethic available to them, that muscle of discipline to be exercised.
Yeah.
But I don't want to create these little monsters either that are like only achievement based. There's no fulfillment.
Oh yeah. I mean, that doesn't get us anywhere. That seems to be a big challenge in today's society. I think that's why, you know, we connect so well, because we really make sure that we create that balance, not only for ourselves as adults, but giving that freedom to our kids as well, not just making it all about you got to achieve this. Oh, you're in preschool. Are you, you know, prepping to go to Harvard from preschool? Like, no.
Cello practice followed by Italian Renaissance painting studies,
followed by reading Leonardo da Vinci's biography, right, to learn about the Mona Lisa. Nah, it's this balance of like allowing them to be just kids. And yeah, one of the things on that note we've really tried to do is, you know, we don't have cable at home, and screen time for the kiddos is pretty limited. You know, they get weekends, Saturday and Sunday, they're able to get some TV, some cartoons, and once in a while during the week they'll maybe one day during the week they'll get to watch like a little show, something like that. But other than that, it's pretty limited what they're doing. But we really try to focus on the dialogue, the human interactions. That seems to be becoming a lost art.
So do you kind of view that as letting them decide what they want to do, but controlling the choice architecture?
I never thought of it like that, but yeah, I would say that. I mean, we do want them exposed to some of the things that are going out there, you know, with some screen time, but we're not just gonna park you in front of a screen for hours on end and going through different things. Dialogue, play, have other creative play. Go outside.
Yeah.
Go. The weather's nice. Go play outside. Go do some of that stuff. You know, the amount of kids we're seeing today that are like, oh, I played baseball on whatever video game system there. It's like, go play baseball, man. Like, go in the backyard and do that.
Yeah.
Don't tell me about how to press the buttons on a controller to do it. Like, go out and do it. Learn about it a little bit.
How about how have you balanced kind of that same dynamic of achievement, fulfillment, pushing, pulling with your spouse? Because I know that can be also, you know, your wife now, she also worked a corporate job and retired from that to do her own business effectively, which is its own, like, that can be a total emotional roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
But two entrepreneurs in the house with young kids, I mean, you're asking for a little bit of some heartache there, you know?
No, I'm with you, man. So for me, I'm gonna start with me and show how that leads to the foundation that creates the we between me and her. I've got 4 key pillars in my life that I'm highly invested in. Number 1, family, friends, those core relationships, getting to really invest in that. Number 2, business, entrepreneurship, 34 strong, maybe other business elements that'll come up. We'll see where the future goes. Number 3 is, you talked about music. And number 4 for me is health and wellness. And over the past few years, that's really evolved into martial arts for me.
Yeah.
But I find that I realize that over time, there's going to be ebb and flow. You're going to have periods where you're highly, highly invested in work, and then you're going to have periods where you're highly invested in like family time. But you have to realize when you're swinging pretty far out, instead of camping out there and saying, I'm stuck there, it's, okay, I know that I'm going to be this way up until Tuesday, but when's it swinging back to create that investment? Now, that being said, that's my pillars of what I look at.
I've heard that called the back burner theory. So you got 4 burners, but you can't keep them all on high and cooking at the same time. So sometimes you got to put one on the back, on simmer, and you could come back to it.
But when you're present, it still comes back. So the reason I tell you those 4 is I love that, the back burner piece. The 4, you get to the place of where you're going to be investing in those. And when you're within any of those spaces, comes back to be present when you're in those spaces. So the way that we've balanced it out, she's a real estate agent. Weekends, I don't try to have a bunch of aspirational goals of all these things I'm going to get done for 34 strong and going through this. That is sacred time with the kids, and I just focus on that. That's a great time to enroll them in different classes, do things with them if they want to, and just go out and have some fun. We go on hikes. One of the fun things to do, take the kids on a hike and just tell them, like we're doing right now, just shh, listen, what do you hear? We were out in Mendocino a couple weeks ago, and Preston, my 2.5-year-old, I'm talking to him. Oh, did you see that? And he looks at me and goes, shh, Daddy. Yes, Sam. He tells me to listen because he's hearing the trees, he's hearing the water flowing, and he's pointing it out. And he was basically telling me, shut the heck up, Dad.
Yeah, get present, Dad.
Get present, dude. And I'm trying to talk to him about other stuff that's out there. But we balance that out by, I know she's got my back and that we're going to work things out with stuff that's going through the week. And we realize that we're going to have these pivots and the ebb and flow. And if she's got stuff that comes up, that's usually the thing that I'm going to step towards first is the family elements. And she knows that, and vice versa. I mean, she really supports me in a lot of things that make me a better version of myself, and I try and do that for her as well. So, she had fallen off the horse for a little while with working out and different things, just as consistently as she wanted to.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we did, she tried this CrossFit gym right down the street from our house, and she had gotten into the rhythm. She's like, man, I really like this getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and going down literally a block away from our house, going down. So I had like this 6-week camp, and she did it, and it was coming to expire, and she was like, I don't know if I want to keep doing it. So one day she was out of town at her friend's graduation in San Francisco. So I went by the gym and just enrolled her, locked her in, and I was just like, this is for your own good, because you love it, it's made you better. I'm not going to let you talk yourself out of doing this because it's made you better. And that's an example of what I've done, but she does that for me constantly. I will make the decision to do things. She will support it and make sure that I have the capacity to do it, and then just remind me. And one of the things that we really lean into, Jake, is have the vulnerable conversations.
Yeah.
Catch each other if you're feeling like somebody is getting way out of their lane or losing sight of the picture. They're focusing on the one tree and missing the rest of the forest. Have the conversation, and we give each other that permission to actually do that, and kind of making that happen, Yeah. So I don't know. That's one of the things that we've learned in going through that to help balance that out. Don't park the frustration, I guess is what I'm getting at. Keep it going. Keep the conversation going. Like with any relationship, you're going to have your ups and downs, but be open to leaning into the discomfort because you're both committed to creating the life you imagined.
My personal strategy, and I don't know how effective it's been, but is to try to pull way more than I push, like probably 10 to 1.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is just setting my own example
Yep.
in a way that hopefully is inspiring enough where someone else, whether it's the kids or my wife or even other family members or friends or whoever,
Oh yeah.
they find it to be inspiring.
Yeah.
And enough to where they're like, I think I could do that too.
Yeah.
If he can do that, then I can do it.
Yep.
So,
Oh yeah.
and I don't know.
They might still think we're batshit crazy while we're doing the things that we're doing
Oh, for sure.
before, and then 2 years later, they're like, oh yeah, okay.
They're doing the
They're
same
doing
thing.
the same thing. I'm in one of those now.
Are you?
I'm in one of those now. Lisa's stepping into the ketogenic diet
Oh,
and
no.
all that stuff, and she's learning all about ketosis and all that. So stepping away from the land of the intermittent fast, or into the land of experimenting with intermittent fasting, and she's looking at me like, "You're actually not that crazy." It only took two years of being like, "You're not that crazy." Well, she still thinks I'm absolutely off my rocker, and I'm sure you get the same thing too.
Well, you know what's funny about that is honestly, so probably about 2007-ish,
Yeah.
I got into a paleo diet.
Sure.
And back then, that was like insanity. Like, what do
Yeah.
you mean you eat like a caveman? That doesn't even, no one was, I got
Nobody-
so much shit from everybody about it.
Yeah.
My wife was actively angry about it because she's like, I'm not gonna cook 2 dinners. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, she's right. It was extreme.
Yep.
But what's funny is fast forward, let's call it about 6 or 7 years,
Yep.
and she's been eating paleo for a while then at that point. She
Right.
gets a job in the paleo community,
Right.
and now she's more extreme than I am. Right now she's testing a carnivore diet.
Wow.
No, it's meat only and some eggs once in a while.
Really?
She's only eating meat right now and has been for about a week. So she's experimenting with it.
Higher fat content meat or lean
Yeah, you
meats, or-
definitely need to get.
So it's still.
It's very keto-like, but you're
very
just basically
keto-like.
cutting you're
Yeah.
not even eating vegetables.
Wow.
And cutting dairy out also, which is another
Well, that's a
big
fat
part
source.
of keto for
Yeah.
a lot of people.
Yeah, cutting the dairy, or unless you're using it as a fat source, right?
Yeah. So she's gone way more extreme than even I ever was. And it's just funny to me that she gave me so much shit beforehand.
Right. That is funny, man. And I feel like Lisa's kind of in that space too. Starting to realize, because she's gotten to that place where things are good, working out, kind of plateaued, but just wants a little bit more of that change, and starting to hear how the whole ketogenic process can play into that, you know. And I'm definitely not perfect in that space, but I know how to get there, you know.
Yeah.
So I know how to get there and be able to live in a good space with that through fasting and through different things that we eat. But I'm just one of those guys, man. I never swing fully into the extreme of like I'm gonna fall into line 100% in this, because you know, sometimes you're out and you're like, damn it, that creme brulee looks really good.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to build to where 90% of the time I'm not going to have that. And I'm totally cool with saying no. But, you know, as Lonnie always says, delay, don't deny, right? Yeah. Sometimes you want to have that, and you want to just go and feast like a freaking lion. Feast like a lion, but know that you can reset on a dime. And you can spend a lot more time in that supercharged energy space. You know?
Well, that is one of the interesting
This is what we all
things
try to aim for.
that I find about a lot of the diets out there is that
Yeah.
there's so much restriction that I think it creates this scarcity kind of mindset, and even that leaks into other parts of your life. Like, I think, you know, a lot of times people are grouchy. There's not an abundance mindset when you're on a full, like, strict diet, it seems like.
Totally, man. I would agree with that, because if the whole thing is just psychologically knowing that, you know, once in a while I want to have a piece of cake, or I want to have a piece of chocolate, and you know, I'm not going to get struck with a bolt of lightning and fall off the fucking planet, which is what seems to some people go to that mindset.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, have the cake, but make sure that you're doing the things 90% of the time where your body will actually be able to deal with that and purge it from you.
Yeah.
Where you're able to take out the trash, where the trash just doesn't build. But for so many people, it's the, I don't know if it's the wrong abundance mindset, or it's a mindset of like, hey, if I'm gonna have sugar, I'm just gonna load up on sugar and just explode on it and live in that space for, you know, a long period of time for what we're doing, you know? And is that really the, I don't know, is that really the right way to kind of go forth? Man, that is a cool view.
Yeah, no, I think it's really hard to figure out if you really have to do a lot of self-education on this topic, I think, because you're not going to get much from the media or a doctor or, American Heart Association.
You mean you can naturally combat all the ailments that exist within us by eating more natural and intermittent fasting? What are we going to do with drugs? Right?
Yeah, no, it is. There's
like,
a lot of money.
That story doesn't play real well for Wall Street and for finances and for all that BS. You mean you're gonna go out in nature?
Well, I mean,
you're gonna breathe more, take in more oxygen? Who would want to do that? You can take a drug for that.
I think you could say that 18% of GDP could probably be disrupted by skipping a meal once in a while.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. Just that's a really good point.
So let's shift back to business. What do you think? Let's say you're in your rocking chair and you're 100 years old. What will you have done over the next 10 to 20 years that you're going to be proud of?
I would be laying down the roots within the workforces of today to become the children of tomorrow, to become the communities of tomorrow and the people of tomorrow. The why behind me doing what I do, that I try to keep a pulse on, not only for myself, but for my team and for the clients we serve, leads to, if we can create better workplaces for people to actually show up at work, guess what they're gonna do, Jake? They're gonna go home, they're gonna be better people to their families, to their spouses, to their children, to their friends, to their community. What does that do for that next generation? It gets us off of, being in the mindset of being able to be stuck in this place of just feeling like, oh geez, I'm a failure. I have to focus on developing my weakness to become my greatest self. So it's breaking that mindset, and we're in the place of being able to help make that a reality and switch the thinking, which is prevalent right now.
So do you think, is it really as easy as getting people into their strength zones at work that will unlock kind of this utopia? It seems almost too obvious.
It's not as simple as that. It takes, because the awareness is one thing. It's the question of what are you going to do with it? Going back to the conversation we were just having about the kids, you might find the talents there in baseball. You might find the talents there in basketball, and you start with that. But how do you finish at a place of strength? Well, you got to put in the work. But it's creating the pathways for people to actually practice that in their work experience, and showing them the doors to where it can open on the home frontier in different ways to make that a reality. That's where the great things will happen. So that's why the work that we do is not just, hey, we come in, we do a workshop, high five, everybody feels great. No, it's a whole process of getting comfortable looking at where your genius is, where you shine, and where you're blind, and owning where you're blind. It's okay to be blind in certain areas, because when you can own that, a lot of times you create an opportunity for somebody else to step into that, and it'll help us to get to those questions. So it's not as simple as just getting into understanding that from a self-awareness standpoint. It's doing the work, folding that into your conversations, and that's where the work that we do really shifts that, because we give the opportunities for those conversations to really actually take place and to become a reality.
That is one of the things I like about the framework, is that it allows people to be vulnerable, and then it removes a lot of the judgment of, well, you're not good at that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's okay because I'm good at this other stuff. Like,
It's
the
exactly.
balance there
It's
lets
that.
people be vulnerable with each other.
It's that, yeah, exactly. It's that part, and then it's also the like, okay, you know what? It's not you. A lot of times people follow these communication patterns where things break up. Oh, I dislike you. You're a bad person. It's not. A lot of times all that's happening is your talents. You're looking at the exact same thing, passionately focused on bringing out the best for that particular scenario and trying to get to the best outcome as you see it versus the way I see it. But we're looking at things from totally different angles, and that balance is part of the brilliance. The analogy I always give, Jake, you have an engineering background in some capacity. We've all seen the Golden Gate Bridge. It doesn't stand because those cables are loose and slack. It stands because there's a healthy amount of tension pulling on both sides. That's actually what creates the strength. The more comfortable that we can get in leaning into our differences, the stronger organizations that we can create, the stronger families that we can create, the stronger communities we can create. Because you're actually comfortable having the frickin' dialogue about the differences. Oh, actually tell me what you see. Because I'm not seeing that. Not like what you see. Part of what just alarms me about social media is it's just echo chambers, right? Everybody camps out in their little echo chambers, and that's where they stay. You either do it my way or you're a bastard, right? And is that really gonna move the needle forward? Is that really what, here we are on the 4th of July talking about this. Is that really at the core of what this country was founded on? It was actually the discourse, the passionate discussions of differences that created the brilliance of what we know of as America, So
Maybe talk a little bit about the basement and balconies of people's strengths, because I found when I learned about that stuff, I was like, wow, okay, like it's kind of a game changer.
Oh yeah. So your talents can be your greatest assets and your greatest liabilities. You can use them in a way that creates what we like to call the balconies, which are actually the strengths. These are the go-tos. This is when a leader is using these, or a person's using these very effectively. Others are looking at it and saying, Jake, I really appreciate that. That really contributed effectively. This is where you're kicking ass, right? This is where you're really, like, I really appreciate, I know you're a deep thinker. I really appreciate you taking the time to park on that issue that I planted in you, taking the time to think about it, and then giving me some really thoughtful feedback. That's how I know you operate best, and giving you that space. Now, the watchouts, the basements, this is when we're using our talents. We're exhausting ourselves. We have our own internal trigger patterns. Sometimes we'll do things that'll cause us to go crazy, and we'll feel like we're spiraling around the drain. There's other times those can be perceived not in the way that we intended. Those can also be the basements where they're showing up and they're not really helping, they're not contributing.
So maybe a practical example will help. One of my top 5 is achiever.
Yep.
So maybe explain what that means, to have a top 5 as achiever, and what the basement and balcony are for those.
Absolutely. So the talent of achiever, an achiever is one of the most dominant themes in the general population, and there's about 18.5 million people that have taken the StrengthsFinder assessment. But the achiever theme, when it's really contributing to teams, it's a wall of energy. It creates finish lines of where the destination is, and it's a wall of productivity, wanting to get lots of things done. It actually gets energy by taking on unrealistic lists, going after them, attacking them, getting them done. So yeah, it actually takes a lot of energy in going through that, and it will bring that forth. And that can be really, really powerful, because it can handle a lot more and doing a lot more than just the average person can. Now,
being able to push through,
being able to continue
to get something across the finish line.
Because once it sees the clarity of the finish line, it's going to work tirelessly to get us there, and it's going to create that energy for others to follow suit with. But sometimes others don't have that same drive and that same energy. It's not drive; it's their energy might come more. And I really need time away from the doing. I need to go spend time with investing in relationships, different things like that.
Yeah.
Now, the watch out for achievers is they can get so task focused on getting this done, getting this done, getting this done, they can overcommit. Next thing they know, they've spread themselves out way too thin. They've taken on way too many things.
What are you saying, man?
I'm not saying that about you. I'm a #1 achiever.
You should say that about me.
This is a challenge I have faced in my life and having to kind of manage through that. But we can overcommit. We can end up basically overworking. Not, people will say you work too much. You're not connected to the people elements as much as you should. Some of those different things. And those are some of the watch outs. When you have that awareness, though, that's how you go through and you have a clarity as to why you do it. The beauty is when you're feeling that way, what does Warren Buffett say when you've dug yourself into a hole, Jake? What's the first? Stop digging. You can realize your own digging patterns and why you do the things. So when you're feeling like, damn it, I've dug myself into a hole, or others are telling me I dug myself into a hole. My wife's telling me that. My kids are telling me that. They're looking at me funny. I got to put the shovel down and I can evaluate. And you can make a conscious choice to keep going down the staircase deeper into the basement, or say, I'm going to stop. How do I get back up top? And that's the stuff that we get into when we're going through actually coaching sessions with people, talking about their particular scenarios that they're going through and working through that.
So here's an interesting question. If you, let's say you're like designing the perfect CEO or leader, let's just say, a little more general. Frankenstein in the lab. What are the top 5 strengths if you could design that leader?
Yeah, there's not one. Each person is, that's a great question, but what Gallup has found in their research is some leaders are incredibly powerful at executing. Some are incredibly powerful visionaries. Some are incredibly powerful influencers. But oftentimes, the greatest ones are the ones who actually know where they're blind, where they're missing, what are the things that they're lacking. So there's not a perfect prescription for a leader, because it's the prescription for leaders is be aware of your strengths, play to those strengths, leverage them, and manage around your weaknesses. That's a prescription for a great leader, being able to step into that place and be vulnerable.
That's kind of an encouraging idea, because then everybody has their strengths and everyone is capable of leadership then. Everybody
is if they want to, but you've got to be willing to lean into that and break the well-roundedness myth that so many of us have fallen victim to. Let's be marginally good at a whole bunch of things, but never really get great or excellent at anything else.
Yeah.
That's the slippery slope that you run through, man. But yeah, so the perfect leader, there isn't a perfect profile for top 5. The best leaders are the ones that lean into their strengths and manage around their weaknesses and are completely open to surrounding themselves with people that will fill in their blinds and aren't scared to ask that question. You got to ask the question, where are my blinds? And create a culture within your organization where people can tell you that. That's powerful.
So there seems to be in the strengths sort of always a point, counterpoint, balance.
Yeah.
Do you think it's smart then, if you are a leader, to hire people that have that counterpoint balance to you, and surround yourself with the people who have your opposite strengths?
I think it's great to create teams that are incredibly well-rounded in talent. You're not trying to be that way as individuals, but as you create teams that are very robustly balanced, and knowing that where you can lean into that space to have that dialogue, I think that's incredibly powerful.
What about some of the friction? Like, let's say you had a board and you had everybody was really high on futuristic, let's say.
Yeah,
so
seeing the vision.
Everyone sees the vision, which is great. Like, everyone's buying into it.
Yep.
That doesn't sound so bad, but where is the downside of that?
Well, some people are buying in. Everybody's walking out of the meeting. What are they doing, Jake? They're giving high fives. Oh yeah, we feel great. We're doing this. Now, who's going to build the path to get there? Who's coming up with the path on how to get there? Somebody's got to anchor down to the now. What's the work we're doing in the now to get us to that vision in the future? Because it's easy.
And who's connecting with the people that are
The
going to make it happen?
Who's keeping it together in those ways? Strengths can be broken down. Our talents can be broken down into these 4 leadership domains without having to get geeking out on strengths too much in terms of all the themes and different things like that. But all talents fall within one of these 4 leadership domains. There's the executing domain, there's the influencing domain, there's the relationship building domain, and the strategic thinking domain. And I'll give you, we're out hiking, we're going up some hills and whatnot, and I'll give you some context on how that kind of shapes itself. So our executing talents, ones like the achiever theme, they like to get things done. They execute. They are driven to take ideas and get them completed. They're kind of like the blueprint domain. Using the analogy of of climbing a mountain, our executing talents get a lot of energy from climbing the mountain. They're the ones that are going to be energized to climb the mountain. Now,
Are they the ones that are up there? They're setting the next anchor point and to pull everyone else up.
They could be setting the next anchor point. They get the energy from going through the climb. Like, gosh, we got that done. We did that. Like, going through that's energizing for them. Our strategic thinking domain, those talents are going to be the ones that are saying, why are we climbing that mountain? Should we be climbing a mountain? Should we be maybe going to the lake instead? Or should we be going to a cave? Why are we doing this? They're going to be the ones that are looking for that. Do we have enough information on this? They're the ones that are going to frame the thinking and ask the questions about the high level why, what, how, and bring that information to a team in a way that can contribute. Our influencing talents, those tend to show up in the lens of saying, you know what? We've decided we're climbing a mountain. Jake, you really want to go on, you really need to go on this climb. I'm going to convince you, I'm going to convince your whole family, all your friends, why they need to climb this mountain. They can do excellent at championing ideas, selling those ideas to make them actually a reality. So they're going to connect through the people. Now, our relationship building talents, they really contribute when we're in the climb, when we're actually climbing the mountain, and saying, how are you doing, Jake? How's everything going? Are you doing okay? Looks like you're struggling.
This guy needs water.
Yeah, they're going to be aware of the people. They connect to people in the now, and they connect to the people. Our influencers connect through people to champion and sell that idea. Our relationship builders really contribute in the way of keeping the team together and keeping people together as we're moving through the fight, as we're moving through the climb. So that's just that's my own little round of analogies that I've come up with that seem to make it a little bit more simple for people to grasp,
Yeah. Did you cover the 4th one? The
influencing, relationship building, strategic thinking,
yeah.
and then executing.
I guess I kind of put relationship and influencing together.
Yeah, they do get linked like that. And again, remember, our influencers connect through people, relationship builders connect to people.
Okay.
So they spend the time, they're more of like the glue sticks that keep the team together to make it greater than the sum of its parts. The influencers are working, hey, let's move this team to influence these other people, but they're not necessarily the glue sticks that are keeping everybody together in the now.
Gotcha.
So that's a big part of that differential as to the way that they play and kind of going through it.
So just thinking like about, let's take like Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
I would imagine, and tell me if I'm wrong, because you obviously are well more versed in this strengths domain, but I would think that like his strengths would probably be something in the futuristic, like he had a vision of what the future would look like, and also the influence part. Like he was able to get people to do things that he wanted them to do, but maybe not so hot on the relationship part from what I've read. And maybe even, I'm not sure about the execution part either sometimes. I mean, I know that they shipped products, obviously.
But was he the one that was actually doing the execution, or was that was building the reality based on that vision of what was there? So to that point, I think you're actually spot on with some things. We don't have the answer per se, but we actually have an exercise called talent spotting, and what we do is we put up photos. This is in one of our workshops that we do. We have photos of different people, and we'll say, okay, what do you think these people's strengths are? So Steve Jobs is one of those photos that we have.
Yeah.
And those are actually talents that come up regularly. People think, hey, this guy's really probably talented in thinking strategically, visionary-wise. The high level why, the high level what, his button phobia, right? That led to the creation of the iPhone. He hated buttons, right? It was that one thing that everything had to be operated around that because he was so against having buttons. But what did that lead to from a visionary standpoint, So he had that. He was excellent at influencing people to make the strategic vision, connecting the right people together and creating that forward movement so they could then execute, so they could then do. On your relationship building side, it seems like maybe there might have been some connection points missing there, with understanding the power of building those relationships. And that stretches just across his life, right? It's not just at Apple, it was just, in his personal life, everywhere. All kinds of stuff like that. Those things, and the whole thing is, Jake, in those places, from an outsider's point, we can look and we can say, oh, geez, why was Steve Jobs like that? Why didn't he value relationships? And for him, that might not have even registered because of his natural patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior. He might naturally think like, hey, the way that we work is we influence people, we come up with the visions, and that's it. He didn't necessarily need that relational connection to be able to work with people. Other people do.
Wasn't he an orphan? Or at least his dad wasn't around?
He was. No, his family, his parents or his mom was Syrian or something like that. And he was orphaned. And and then I can't remember all the details, but I think he was orphaned when he was 6 months old or something like that. I don't remember all the details from the biography, but it's in there. It is in there.
Yeah, that's that's one of the things I think about sometimes with, there's some interesting percentage of the truly
biggest,
most what we would call classically successful people had really difficult childhoods or were orphans or no dads. Bezos, was adopted, had a stepdad, all that kind of thing.
Yep.
Even Da Vinci was an illegitimate son.
Right.
He was a bastard child.
Mm-hmm.
All these people, it almost seems like there's some kind of chip on the shoulder that's required to truly be one of the history's greats. Mm-hmm. But it also makes me wonder, are these people ever really happy in life? And so I think about my own kids, and this kind of comes back to the achievement versus fulfillment discussion, but I think about my own kids, and they've got a pretty easy life compared to 99% of children in the world. Am I doing them a disservice by making their life so damn easy?
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that. That's something that Lisa and I both wrestle with constantly because we feel that way too for some of the things that the kids just have that's just at Beckon's called. Neither of us had when we were kids. Our families just financially weren't there, and we've been able to, thankfully, we've had generational progress, and we're not in a space where, that's the case now or any of that sort of stuff, and that's what you want to see. But at the same time, you think of the gift of hustle that was stitched right into your DNA from young, that maybe that is a disservice, I don't know, but we're trying to really think of what are the ways that you can condition that level of thinking and resiliency of being able to rise up in other methods, and kind of going through that, So that's kind of the dialogue that we're kind of going through. So you're kind of feeling that way as well, huh?
Yeah, no, I am. And it's like, I don't know what to do a lot of times with these kids because their life is so easy. And I feel like, am I just going to make them lazy from that? I mean, they have their expectations of what the world owes them, I think, are, even though I try to tamp it down, it's just hard. I mean, growing up in a safe, semi-affluent community, their expectations are being set by their peers.
Yep.
And if my 10-year-old, if all of his friends have an iPhone now, and I don't agree with that,
well, he expects that everyone else has one. Why doesn't he have one?
That's his echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
That he's in. Yeah. It is pretty crazy to see that, and that's part of the balance that I feel like we're challenged against right now. Because I agree with that. It's definitely at the core of some of the things that are driving us and different things, and kind of thinking through it. Because we've definitely had some of those types of experiences, just with Kira just being a little older. Something will happen, or she'll weigh something, be like, oh, just go buy another one, or just go do this, and I'm just like, really? Okay. So we've actually gotten to the place with her, each week, she does some chores, different things like that. It's a little bit of an allowance, but it's a baseline. But I've told her, if you see other things that need to get done around the house, you should do it, just as part of the family dynamics to kind of help out. But if you want to do other things that are there, and you want to just work on negotiating different things like that,
Yeah.
we can talk about that. And the other thing is
To
that we
encourage her to be an entrepreneur,
entrepreneur,
and not an employee.
not exactly, but then also teaching her, like, if you hustle, there can be rewards. I don't want her to just expect that everything that you do, you're going to be able to get an extra paycheck for it either. So
Right.
it's like, you see stuff that needs to get done at home, take care of it. I'm not going to give you money for putting your
Every
clothes
little
away. Yeah, put your damn clothes away, like after they've gone through. But other things, if she's going above and beyond, and that's it's conditioning those kinds of habits. The other thing that we've done, it was an experiment we tried in Mendocino, and we liked how it played out, was when she is going through, she'll want different things, and just like any kid. So when we're in Mendocino, we told both the kids, you can each get one gift, one thing that you like on the trip. You can buy it. Mom and Dad will put up to $15 into it for you. That's all. And we told her, if you want anything more than that, you take it out of, you have to pay with your own money, your allowance, different things like that. So initially there was this really cool kind of customized toy shop that was downtown. She saw something that she wanted for like $40. So we explained to her what $40 was, how much work that was going to take. And she was like, wow, that's a lot. So she ended up making the decision of getting 2 items that totaled like $16 or $15 and left off on the $40 place. But she got to understand the opportunity cost piece. But we're trying to teach her as well, like, the value of work, but then also money doesn't just, we're in the trees right now. It doesn't grow in the trees for us to just go pick, and you're gonna have to commit to some of that and different things that you've had. So I don't know where that's gonna lead, but it's something that we've started recently because she's showing more interest in learning about that and the value of that. And I don't know how that'll transpire when she turns 10 and wants an iPhone 20 or whatever it is at that point. I'll probably still be about 3 or 4 generations back because I am a caveman with that stuff, but
one thing we've done with our boys that I think I'm hoping is good, although we'll see. So I set up a brokerage account for each one of them.
Right.
And any money that they give me to put into it,
Yep.
I'll match it, dollar for dollar.
That's pretty cool.
So I want them to think about delaying gratification first of all, and I'm making that much easier for them by giving them 100% return on their investment to start.
Yeah.
Then, once they've got enough built up, they can go and buy some share in something that they like. So, my oldest, he bought a share of Berkshire as his first investment.
First investment. That is cool. That's not a bad first investment.
The younger one is still building up enough to be able to buy something like that. But we talk about different businesses and like, oh, would you buy this one?
Yeah.
And I try to frame like, well, it's not just always a good business. A lot of times the price matters as well. So so my youngest had his birthday recently, and he came up to me and he hands me a $20 bill. He says, Dad, put this in my brokerage, please.
Wow.
He's saving his money. He wants to build it up. So I was like, all right, son,
something clicked somewhere.
$40 going into your brokerage account.
Something's clicking, man. Something's clicking.
The other thing I was thinking about doing, and I'm not sure yet exactly when or how to administer this, but rather than buying them a car, which seems like what everybody does these days for if they can afford it, I'm thinking about giving them some chunk of money, maybe relatively soon for my oldest.
Yeah.
And letting him manage it until he's 16.
To buy his own car.
And he can buy his own car. And he can decide, God, I saw how much work it was to grow this.
Yep.
I have some idea of the opportunity cost now of just going and having to buy this car, or would I rather save my money and get a cheaper car? But letting him make some of these decisions now when he's younger and the stakes are lower, rather than...
The stakes are lower, but if you get it conditioned in within that high school age brain where they can actually make those decisions and those choices there, the resiliency that's going to be wired in from beyond that is powerful, you know? Instead of expecting like, oh, Dad's just going to get me, you know, a brand new whatever, which I know you're not going to do.
He's in for a rude awakening if that's what he's expecting.
It's like, you were getting a salvage title, baby.
Yeah, well, and that was the other move that we made. When they were first born, each one of them, I set up a 529, and I put in $200 a month for their entire childhood.
Yep.
And it's not that even I wanted to have money for their education, like I'll pay for that somehow, but I didn't want them to think that there was just some blank check when they turned 18 to pay for college.
Yeah.
The amount that's in there that has been built over those 18 years,
what we got.
that's what we have for that.
Yep.
So make it work somehow.
Yeah, and that's kind of the direction, you know, we set that up for the kids too. Obviously when Preston was born, there was a lot of family transitions, different things you knew were going on with us were different job losses that were taking place in our household. So we got started with him, it was on a much smaller scale. So the past, I think the past couple year or so, I've had him actually in at a higher rate than we had Kira in at, because we were just catching him up over the course of, over the course of these couple years. Just get him right-sided a little bit. So we've been just putting away a little bit more for him than we were for her for right now, but that's going to even back out. I think after this year we'll look at reallocating that.
One of the things that I have been struggling with a little bit on that is like, my oldest has already said that he wants to go to Stanford. And first of all, I was like, hold on a second, why do you want to go to Stanford? Because your mom went to Cal.
Yeah.
So that's already kind of strike one.
Yeah.
And also the price difference there is not small.
Yeah.
If he gets into Stanford, am I really gonna say no?
Yeah.
Boy, that would be a tough conversation. Is my wife gonna go along with that? Holy cow, I don't know.
Yeah. And that's the thing, what's starting to happen. I was talking with somebody that's looking at colleges right now, and they're starting to realize like going out of state's a better option, because even paying out of state tuition versus paying in-state in California is cheaper.
Is that right?
For some places, yeah. Somebody was telling me about it with their decision-making framework, and that's what's driving one of their kids towards, I don't remember which states it was, but they're actually looking at that because it's actually pretty comparable even with room and board and everything and out-of-state tuition, because tuition rates have risen so high here.
Wow.
So, who knows, man, where it'll be by the time our kids are going to school, you know?
Well, my pet theory on that is that I think we're going to see actually a huge bifurcation in the education space. First of all, it's like totally untenable, the amount that it's risen.
Yeah.
It's insanity.
Yeah.
However, I think that the premier institutions, the Stanfords, the Harvards, MITs, I think that they are going to continue to have pricing power because of the network effects of going to that and the signaling that takes. Like, if you get into Stanford, you go to Stanford, you have a pretty good chance of landing a job. Life's probably going to work out okay for you.
Yeah.
Right, your downside is pretty well covered.
Yeah.
However, tier 2 school, you know, even like where we went, UC Davis, I don't see a world where they make any sense. I think that, why would I go to the second tier school and learn from the 50th best person on marketing in person when I could go into a class that's online that has the number 1 or number 2 person teaching that subject for a millionth of the price?
Yeah, exactly.
the quality to price ratio just gets so out of whack
Yep.
at some point that why would I ever go
Yep.
to a local school
Yep.
that gives me a subpar experience for a high price?
Yep.
So I think there'll be the low end, which will be fantastic education for super cheap. And then there'll be the high end still that still makes sense for
But
some.
distributed, the low end will be distributed via our network channels that we have of the internet and different things like that, online education platforms.
Exactly.
But they'll offer it at a fraction of the price, but you're still getting access to the top minds. Yeah, that makes sense.
Everyone in between, game over. There's no.
Well, from a cost standpoint, because I feel like when we made those decisions, you know, over a decade ago now, it was a wise decision to be able to make at that time, because there was a lot of value with the classroom time, the in-person time, the stuff that, you know, look at our relationship. It was built through that time there, and that's some of the stuff that you won't be able to replicate. But as the cost parameters continue to go up, like you said, it starts changing that effect. Even when we bought it, we knew it was the most expensive date we were ever going on to find. End up finding some of your closest friends that you know you're going to be walking alongside with on the journey of life with. But it was damn expensive, you know.
Yeah.
In going through, and that was, you know, 12 years ago dollars, you know, and what it costs now, God only knows, you know.
Yeah.
And that particular pricing and that.
No, I mean it was a $60,000 networking event.
Yes.
I mean you could have been like the Great Gatsby and just thrown massive parties for that $60,000 and see who shows up, and probably built a comparable network, because it wasn't like the class materials were, at least in my personal opinion, didn't seem like the class materials were like earth-shattering.
No.
It was stuff you could get
They
anywhere.
they were good. I liked some of the frameworks, the framework that was put down in the process, but at the time, even the focus on entrepreneurship, it was, you know, imaginary at best.
Yeah.
You know, they tried to tout it, and I think they're trying to shift that balance now, but that's actually a big problem in a lot of colleges. I feel like they'll talk about entrepreneurship, different things, but they're not really doing the things. I feel like, you know, Davis has gotten better at actually trying to fold that in, but at the time we were there, it didn't really seem like that was fully transpiring the way that it could.
I'm trying to remember any one particular idea that stood out for me in that entire 3 years. How about you? Like what was something that you learned that you feel like was like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know that before?
Yeah. This is gonna make you laugh, but it was a class that you and Lonnie taught on value investing. It was just simplifying all of the BS and all the complex spreadsheets and different things that I couldn't remember, or don't have a clue how to do any of that stuff today, and taking all of these up here concepts and landing the plane for just a frickin' idiot dumb shit like me that can understand finance just enough, but just wants the simple pieces of, okay, what are the most important things to look at when looking at financial statements within a company. Let's take the complexity and the bullshit out of it, and you guys did that, I think, not only for me, for a lot of others, because there was plenty of us that were in there that understood finance enough to be able to operate and run in that space. You know, in my current role, I do some of those elements, but it's not because of these crazy complex models. It's because of what are the simple indicators that really tell the story, and the ability to look at things simply with clear eyes and see the details that actually matter as opposed to all the noise. That was the takeaway. That was one of the best things that I got. So interestingly enough, the two guys that taught the class that were paying to take the class that they were teaching.
Only that first year.
Yeah, only that first year. They had to pay, but I was in the inaugural class, you know. It was like,
well, that was,
wow,
I feel
nuts.
bad for you, because that first class was garbage compared to by the time we taught it like the fourth year.
Yeah,
by then I'd figured out how bad I really was at teaching.
But we got into the details enough, and it's not like I didn't get to watch you evolve. I mean, we get to hang out together pretty frequently, so I got to watch your evolution of thought as things were going through and you were getting into teaching it more and more. So
I think about that class sometimes now and think about what I would teach and how much more nuance and things I understand than I did, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I almost like, I don't want to say I feel sick to my stomach, but it's like, I can't believe that I had no business teaching at that time. I didn't know enough.
Yeah.
I knew just a tiny bit more than the students knew, and I just stayed.
Actually enough.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
Time.
No, what I realized later was that teaching is probably best done at leaving a 50% headroom on your knowledge versus what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to explain something, you should not go all the way up to like your level of explaining.
Yeah.
Or understanding, I mean.
Yeah.
You should stay about half of what you really truly understand.
Yeah.
And present that part.
Create simplicity. Yeah. Create simplicity and then learn from there.
When you know when you're talking to somebody and you're explaining something and you know that you're kind of getting out on the edge of what you really understand.
Yep.
That's when you're probably your most dangerous.
Yep. Because they might still, from the perception effect, they might still look to you as the knowledge holder, and you might be missing the mark.
Well, I know I am.
Yeah. Kind of going through. Yeah, great view. Great view. And the air is actually, I think, a lot better today than it was yesterday morning. Not as smoky, at least. Yeah, I agree on the knowledge base though, because simplifying things is huge. But that, again, getting back to your original question of what was something that really stood out, and it was the simplicity of looking at the financial statements of different things like that. And I feel like the spirited discussions and the natural bond that happens through, it wasn't even the classes necessary, it was more like the grind of doing the work, going to battle, and then finding who your battle-tested mates were. That conditioned a lot for me of, I feel like, even what I'm doing today in business, because you learn so much, because people are just going through life issues, trying to deal with school, trying to deal with job changes, life changes, all that. And that just really hardens that, really strengthens that bond that's there, but also gives you some really dynamic insights into what good teams are. And then, hey, we all had those partners that you wanted to push off a cliff at times. When you were working through, they weren't holding their line. Those were also gifts as well. They didn't feel like it at the time, but they really were. In terms of what you were getting, in terms of learning about what a high functioning team looks like.
Quick little funny story. There was a woman in our class that it was a negotiations class, and I forget what we were negotiating about exactly.
Yeah.
But her and I ended up being partners for something, and we were negotiating. And I saw this play out with her with other people as well.
Yeah.
And she had to win that negotiation and push and get every little inch.
Yep.
And she was so proud of herself that she had won the negotiation.
But lost the actual war.
Well, no, she lost the real reason we're there, which is to build friendships and networks. And nobody wanted anything to do with her after that.
Yeah.
So she won the battle, but totally lost the war.
Yeah, exactly.
And I wonder, where am I doing that in other places in life where I think I'm winning, but I'm really losing?
Well, you're actually asking about the blinds, right? And that's the key. And sometimes people will get so anchored on that you won that, but you didn't really win. And that gets back to what Simon Sinek's newest book that he's coming out with later this year is, and this is a space that we talk about extensively when we're stepping into organizations and looking at the high level leadership. What game are you playing? Are you playing a finite game or are you playing the infinity game?
Yeah, what does that explain? I've read that before.
Yeah.
And when I read it, I was like, oh shit, that's a game changer.
Yeah, it's
so explain it?
Yeah, so you already embody the infinite game, but what's baseball? An infinite game or a finite game?
9 innings.
9 innings, it's finite. I can't come to you after 9 innings, you whoop my behind, you're up by 8 runs to my 4, and I can't come to you at the end of 9 innings and say, Jake, if I just had 2 more innings, I'd whoop your ass. We can't do that. The game ended. We agreed to that, and the reason of that is the rules are there. The rules are there, they're predetermined, and there's a clear ending to it. Now, the infinity game, you don't play that game to win. I'm not playing to beat you. We're playing the game to keep it going on. Think about our friendship, our connection that we have. We're constantly playing the infinity game because it's this continual willingness to push each other, to challenge each other in different ways, to become better versions of who we are as individuals in our lives and different things. But you're playing and giving willingly to other people, to your teams and different things like that to keep things going. So you're playing to keep the game going. Yeah. That's what it's all about. And within cultures, within companies, within organizations.
So what's business then?
In business, it's not the mindset of, hey, I'm going to beat my competition. Like, who defined what the game is? There's no end point. There's no ninth inning. The whole game is, when you take the mindset of, gosh, what was Costco's CEO?
Jim Senegal?
Yeah, the one that said, while everybody's worrying about corporate earnings on Wall Street every quarter, I'm worrying about where we're going to be in 50 years, and those sorts of things. That's the infinity game of realizing some days, today, our company might be ahead, tomorrow we'll be a little bit behind, but we're doing the work for the long term to keep the game going and basically outlast whoever your competition is, or worrying about that, or redefining the parameters where it's not, oh, we beat you this quarter. Who gives a crap if you won this quarter? It doesn't mean anything in the long-term perspective of things, because it takes the focus off of the external pieces and focuses it more internally to be able to play infinitely. And you got to create that internally within the teams that you're creating and the cultures as well, that we're here to build for the long term. It's not an experience like your colleague in business school.
That wasn't the infinity game.
That was not the infinity game. I won. Did you? Yeah. Okay. But we all have nuggets like that. I definitely had. We all have nuggets like that. I definitely had one of those experiences in B school too, where you had somebody like that was on a team. It's like, my gosh, what are you doing?
So how does the infinity versus finite game changing the way you're thinking about how your entrepreneurship and building your own business?
Yeah, it's I'm aware of competition that could be out there, but instead of focusing on, hey, what's our competition doing? Let's do what our competition's doing. It allows you to set a new standard of realizing if you're on a road that hasn't been built yet and you're digging that, you're not going to have that level of competition. You have to get out ahead. So instead of just focusing on that and aiming towards the things that your competition is doing, it actually forces you to stand out, because you're not doing this to just beat them. That's not what your focus is. You're doing this with more of a meaning. It comes back to, if I'm playing the infinity game of trying to not only impact workplaces, but really impact the next generation of kids, of children, through their parents today, through these people that are in the communities, is there really a game to that, like how I'm doing against my competition? Does that really matter if I beat my competition on landing an engagement, a one-off engagement that maybe we didn't really want anyhow? It just, Joseph McClendon, Tony Robbins, his number 2, he always says you are what you focus on, right? So if you get pulled towards, hey, did I beat my competition strictly, and that's your only focus on that particular piece, you can actually lose sight of the greater framework of the game that you're playing on a visionary level. So it keeps you anchored, Jake, on what are the open spaces that you're actually aiming for. And on the path of traveling there, your competition's going to beat you at certain things. And it's given me the resiliency to be able to say, okay, I'm okay with that. I am going to learn from, hey, maybe there was things we could have done differently. within the to have gotten that engagement. But there's also things like, there's been plenty of times where that's happened. I've looked at it and the reasons they made the decision, I'm like, you know what? That wasn't the right connection for us, and I'm okay with that.
So what do you think about the, it seems like if you are playing an infinity game in business, what's the one thing that you need to do is really survive, right? Yep. You have to get to the next round to play.
Yep, exactly.
So does that mean that you would never take any debt, like no leverage? Does that mean, focusing, like maybe it means like going slower than to be careful. And I find that balance to be very interesting especially right now, it feels like there is a bias towards just get big really as fast as you can. Doesn't matter if you're making any money. There's a bunch of companies right now out there that are just trying to get scale as fast as they can.
Yep.
And they're not making any money.
Yep.
And it seems like they're raising equity and debt constantly to keep this game going.
Yep.
I mean, what am I the sucker that's just missing out on this gold rush, or is there something else going on there?
Well, I think you and me are both suckers then, but it's the longevity approach versus the being relevant now. Do you want to be the one-hit wonder that just shows up and then surges off? I always come back to, there was your Krispy Kreme example, you come back to the candle store Illuminations, right? Mm-hmm. Both of them from a brand standpoint had a lot of power. Illuminations had an incredible brand back when, but they grew way too fast, over leveraged. My retail construction experience taught me that as well, because I watched that and then crash, those cycles. So it is the ability to realize that, to be able to pause long enough to realize I don't have to get into the herd mentality. And I pull those reins pretty strongly for 34. So far, 5 years in, we haven't taken out any debt, and that's the plan that we want to continue on. And that's I believe a healthy way to grow it, because my thought is, if you do get to the place of where you are looking for equity, when you're actually seated at that negotiation table, your ability to be able to stand up and walk out on that negotiation, if it's not going in your way, being able to basically have controls of that, because it's just like, let's get one thing straight. We didn't build this to this point without with you guys here. We were able to do this, and if we've got to go back and hustle and stitch it together, we're gonna figure that out. So knowing that, and having somebody sitting across the table looking at you, knowing that you did that, it changes the game from a negotiation standpoint towards your infinity game, not them driving it.
Burn rate left.
Yeah, exactly.
You
so
have to get that raise to make it.
Exactly, where you're like, I'm doing this, and the business is on the death spiral. Now, being able to stay conditioned in a space where you're growing slow and steady for the long-term play is. It takes work, man. I was telling you, we were in Big Tree down there in Calaveras County and in California here. And, you're standing there next to these giant sequoias that are 3,500 freaking years old, and they're their own ecosystems. And then you realize one pine cone that can fit in the palm of your hand holds 90,000 seedlings, and one seedling of those things starts at about the size of a grain of oatmeal. It takes 3,500 years, but it's supported from a frickin' grain of oatmeal. Like, the power of that, and the power of those kinds of stories that humble you when you actually go into the world and spend time in nature. Look at nature. Get out of business for a second. Look in the world, and you can see those kinds of examples everywhere. The root systems for those trees are massive. On their own, they create a forest, but on their own, each one of them is their own little ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. You got to look at it in that lens. And the adversity that's come, the storms, the fires that they've weathered, has not made them weaker. That's actually created their strength. And if you grow too fast without the roots down, well, what happens when the winds come? Your shit blows down. So do the work on the roots as you're growing upwards, and that root system will help go through. And that's part of what brings me back to nature so frequently, because I find that those stories and those reminders are written in the history books of the world without man's footprint on it. And if you actually spend the time to look, the stories are right there. You just got to pause long enough. You just got to pause long enough to actually take it in.
There's no time to pause. I got to get this massive platform built on whatever you're working on, and
yeah, I got to get
scale,
get
market share.
Get market share, and then find that the windstorm blows through and you didn't have the roots to support it. So what do? You put more money onto the ground. It's kind of like watering the tree that's grown too fast without the roots and just dumping extra buckets of water on it. It can't, the roots that are needed to support it aren't going to grow any faster. You know?
Yeah.
That's the best analogy I got at this moment in time.
There is one I've read that when I feel like I'm not achieving enough in life, there's this bamboo that will put down roots for something like 18 or 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's just growing under the ground, this massive root system, and you don't see it.
Yep.
But meanwhile, it's working every day.
Yep.
And then after 20 years, I believe, it grows at this just incredible rate, like almost like you could watch it grow. It's so
like
fast.
multiple feet per day. I've heard that story, isn't it?
I think it's, I mean, it's like, an inch every couple hours or 4 hours or something, like an insane growth for any kind of plant. But it's because it's put in the work, the decades of dedicated work
that nobody sees.
Nobody sees underground, growing the root system to then be an overnight success, right?
Exactly. And you're not going to pull up as you plant a tree in the garden, or you plant a plant in the ground and you see it growing. You're not going to pull it out every 2 weeks and say, hey, I just want to make sure the roots are growing. That's part of where you have the faith that it's happening because of what you're nurturing. And
that's a good point.
You're not going to do that. We're not going to go to those trees we're staring at now and say, gosh, I wonder if there's roots that are down there.
Let's dig it up.
Let's dig it up. You have to have the faith that the work that you're putting in right now, even though it's in the soil, it's in the dirt, it's going to lead to that. And, truth be told, man, it's like that's part of, like I was telling you early on in our conversation, I'd gotten away from blogging, doing some of that stuff for right now. And I've used this phrase constantly over the course of the past 8 to 9 months. I've gone to ground. Because a lot of people have contacted me. They're like, where are you? Like, you've just kind of fallen off. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's been kind of intentional. Getting out of the noise chamber of what's out there, getting our work back, and focusing on that space. And it hasn't hurt our business, I'll tell you that. Our business has been growing very, very nicely because we've been focusing on that part intentionally. But it's given me the clarity on what the business needs. So when we turn the jets back on, going out there and doing all that good stuff, the roots are actually there to sustain that. And that's really been the mindset that I've tried to adapt personally. That comes back to those 4 pieces I was talking to you. What am I doing investing in those spaces with your burner analogy, and realizing sometimes you're not cooking on all 4 burners, but they're all there.
I like to think a lot of times that I'm doing the work now that's quiet and the root system that makes you deserving of when the actual success does come.
Yep.
And then actually, ironically, I kind of get the feeling, and based on everything I've read, that when that success, quote unquote, does arrive, it doesn't even matter at that point. You don't even care about it because you've already done the things that made you happy to get there.
Exactly. The harvest is there, but you're grateful for the journey. And that's the whole thing. Success is not just a destination. You don't arrive. It's a state of mind. I feel like you're a person I've always looked to and felt you're successful because of the fact that you live the life that you want to live. I work on trying to do that as well because so many people don't ever get that chance to do that because they don't pause long enough to think about what is the life that I want to live? What is it that I want to do? And if you're not going to pause long enough,
well, if you don't ask yourself that question, society will tell you 1,000 times what the answer is.
That's exactly what the point is. So if you allow that to be dictated, then that's exactly what will happen. And it leads to a state of mind, a place in your mind, your soul, where maybe there's discontent. And that discontent is actually a beautiful thing because it's showing you, it's illuminating something for you. There's a reason you feel that way. But you have to ask yourself, am I going to do anything with that signal, or am I just going to allow it to swallow hard and keep going, knowing that I'm aiming for mediocrity? You know? Some of us have that willingness to do something about it. Others just get comfortable settling. And keeping that mindset of just being in that place of hunger, you know, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and not having just a whole bunch of unnecessary things, it keeps you in a place where you'll keep in that abundance mindset. You'll keep growing, because abundance doesn't mean you have all these things just because you have them for no good reason. It's actually having, well, what are the things that I really need to make me happy? That's abundance, at least the way I look at it. It's being in that state of mind of what success is and what happiness is across the board.
Well, Dee, I think that's a beautiful way to wrap up this little conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on, and I always love our time together, and I always feel like we don't get enough, so this has been a real treat to, and on your birthday, no less. So
First thing I did on my birthday was drive to Folsom, come up here, get to listen to Ray Dalio on the way up here, and get to hang out with you. I'm just a few hours into being awake for the birthday, and what a heck of a start to 38, man. I hope I have many more days like this in 38.
Hey, it's Jake here again. I hope you enjoyed this hike with Darren Virassammy as much as I did. If you like this Hikecast format, or maybe even want to take me on your favorite hike, shoot me an email at 5goodquestions@gmail.com, all spelled out. Lastly, be on the lookout for my first literary effort, The Rebel Allocator, coming out later this year. Hopefully I'll see you on the trail soon.